Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Heather Staverman. I'm the Senior Director and Acting Vice President for the Professional Development Department at ELFA. And on behalf of ELFA, it's my pleasure to welcome you all today for our webinar, Brain Health at Work, Building Focus, Resilience, and Long-Term Well-Being. The session is being recorded and will be available for replay later this week. We'll have that posted on the ELFA website. If you have questions for our speaker, please feel free to type those into the chat panel, and he will address them as we go through the presentation. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can, and we'll see how much time allows, but feel free to be nice and chatty with everyone. And now I'd like to turn everything over to Amy Jackson, Chair of the ELFA Women's Council, for introductions and a bit about today's speaker. Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Heather. So on behalf of the ELFA Women's Subcommittee, we're glad that everyone is joining us for today's discussion on brain health at work, building focus, resilience, and long-term well-being. This session is part of our broader mental health initiative, which focuses on supporting the well-being of professionals across the equipment finance industry through practical, approachable programming. For those who may be newer to the group, the ELFA Women's Subcommittee is a community of leaders across the equipment finance industry who are committed to advancing inclusion and expanding access for women across all stages of their career. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Trinh. Dr. Trinh is a physician, educator, and chief medical officer for the Healthy Brain Clinic, where his work centers on brain health, longevity, and Alzheimer's prevention. He also serves on the boards of Alzheimer's Orange County and Alzheimer's Los Angeles, and is deeply involved in both clinical research and community education. In addition to his clinical work, he's a speaker, author, podcast host, known for translating complex science into practical, actionable strategies. And he's also the founder of Tongue Out Medical Missions, leading global efforts to provide care to underserved communities. We're honored to have him with us today. This is actually his third appearance, supporting some of the initiatives of the ELFA Women's Subcommittee. And we're eager to hear how his insights on brain health is shaped by the connection between the body, mind, and purpose. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Trinh.
All right, thank you. Okay, hey guys, I think this is my third time with you guys here, 3 years in a row. Now, I want to make this interactive and conversational. So I have the chat box open. Type in hello if you're able to use the chat box. I want to see and make sure that I'm able to see messages and stuff like that. So let's see here. So type in hello if you're able to see. All right. I think currently my view is to the organizers with that on the chat box. So we'll see if we can change that view to general and be able to see everyone's message and comments and things of that sort.
Looks like everyone is replying in our questions box. So I see quite a few people putting some things into the questions box.
Where do I see the questions box?
Is it top right has a question mark?
Oh, the questions box. It says no questions yet. Hold on. You guys see me type hello in the questions box?
Yes, I see you.
Can okay, everyone type in stuff in the questions box because I just see myself. Let's see. I only see my own message.
Oh no. Okay.
No. Let's see here. Maybe it's an access thing.
I will take a look at that in the background back here, and you can.
Yeah, I'll start chatting with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today my goal is to help you connect between the body, the mind, and purpose. I don't know if you already realize, but but what we do with our body affects our mind, affects our brain, and it goes vice versa. What we think, what we feel, what goes on in our mind also affects our body with that. And so the connection is this way. I have a question for you guys here. What is the difference between neurology and psychology? Does anyone know? What is the difference between neurology and psychology? Does anyone know with that? Yeah, I don't see answers yet, so you can always tell me what some of these answers are.
I will do. Yes.
The difference between neurology and psychology. Any thoughts into that with that? And so if you think of a computer, neurology, when I think of neurology, I think of the brain, brain cells, nerves, and things that you can see, the anatomy, neurology. And so in a computer, neurology would be your hardware, right? The hardware, the CPU, the RAM, the monitor. So neurology would be the hardware of the brain. And if that's the case, then, okay. If that's the case, then what is software? What is psychology? Psychology is basically how your brain actually works, right? It is essentially the software of a computer with that. Cool. I'm seeing some answers come here. Psychology is mental health. Yes. Neurology includes brain health. Yes. So neurology is the hardware and psychology is the software of how the brain works. Does that make sense to you guys so far? Uh, Let me know if that makes sense. I don't want to lose anyone as I'm going through this with that. Does that make sense? Neurology is the hardware, the brain cells, the connections, the nerves, whereas psychology is the software. Psychology is basically our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. Mental health is psychology, whereas neurology is conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, and things of that sort. Okay, cool. Yeah, so mental health is in the world of psychology, and in the world of neurology, it's diseases affecting the brain cells itself, like Alzheimer's. How are they connected? Is the big question. And are they connected at all? The first thing I want to go with you before we do a deeper dive to all this is how many brain cells do we have? Does anyone know how many brain cells we have? What is our average number of brain cells? Any thoughts on that? Any guesses? Any guesses you want to put in the chat box of how many brain cells are out there in a normal, healthy person with that? Okay. In a normal, healthy person, we have on average probably about 86 billion brain cells. Okay, a normal healthy person, 86 billion brain cells. And every time you have a thought, your brain cells are connecting, they are chatting, they're communicating, right? Every thought that you have is basically brain cells connecting, chatting, and talking. Okay, good guesses. I see 500 million. Somebody wrote 50, 60 thoughts a day, lots of brain cells, 3 billion. That's right. So 86 billion brain cells. Every thought that you have is brain cells connecting, talking, chatting with each other. Every feeling that you have is also a pattern of brain cells connecting. Feelings are actually not some, ethereal, in the gray sky emotions. Feelings, believe it or not, are actually substance that can be measured. Did you know that? Feelings create chemicals that can be measured with that, right? So our thoughts, brain cells connecting, our feelings, our patterns of brain cells connecting, chemicals that are created, and every memory that you have is also a connection of patterns of brain cells connecting. So my memory of driving to work this morning could be this group of brain cells over here, okay, chatting, connecting with each other. My memory of turning on the laptop, chatting with you guys right now is this group of brain cells over here, connecting, talking, and communicating with us with that. So every thought, every feeling, every memory is groups of brain cells, 86 billion brain cells communicating with each other. Does that make sense to you guys so far? Type in yes if that makes sense. That every thought, every feeling, and every memory is groups of brain cells connecting and communicating and just talking with that. Okay, very cool. When hardware breaks down, there are a number of conditions that are associated with the hardware and the brain cells breaking down. These conditions include Alzheimer's disease, where we lose brain cells are dying over time. These conditions include Parkinson's disease, where we lose brain cells are going away and they're dying over time. These conditions include ALS. It includes Lewy body dementia. It includes alcohol-induced dementia. And so there are many reasons for the hardware to break down over time. When hardware breaks down, you lose brain cells. We have a name for that. We call it neural degeneration. Neural degeneration is when the hardware breaks down, kind of like the computer. And we have definitive diagnosis for neurodegeneration when the hardware messes up. Does that make sense to you guys so far? Type in yes if that makes sense. When hardware breaks down, you lose brain cells, they go away, and you get what we call neurodegeneration. That's neurology, right? That's neurology. If that makes sense to you, let me know. I will make sure that I'm not losing anyone in this process with that. Very cool. Okay. I get a lot of yeses here. I'm seeing it with that. So, what happens? What happens when software breaks down? What happens when this hardware is intact, but the software breaks down? Does anyone know? Any thoughts on software versus hardware? What happens when software breaks down, and we become unhealthy from a software perspective? What do we call that? What do we call that, guys, when software breaks down? We call it depression. We call it anxiety. We call it stress. Yes, mental health. Mental health is when software is not working well in your brain. Mental health is when software is not working in your brain. Absolutely. Psychosis, depression, mental illness is a software problem, whereas the hardware problem is Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's. So do you guys see the difference between disorders of hardware versus disorders of software in the brain? Does that make sense to you guys so far? Brain cancer, hardware. Right? Does that make sense to you guys so far, the difference between hardware and software? I want to make sure that everyone's following. No, I'm not losing anyone in the science here, okay? So, never heard so clearly, huh? All right, so here we go. Let's first talk about how to protect our hardware. Things that you can do to protect the brain cells from going away. Things you can do to minimize what we call dementia. Okay, dementia could be Alzheimer's, it could be Parkinson's, it could be ALS. There's all kinds of condition that leads to like dementia, right? How do you protect? How do you prevent? And what can we do with our body to protect our brain, right? To protect our mind. Are you guys ready? Do you have your notepads? Are you ready? I'm going to give you 14 things, 14 things, 14 health conditions that are all lifestyle related. That if you can identify which one of these 14 you may be at risk for and keep them under control, in theory, you can delay or prevent up to 45% of global dementia cases. Up to 45%, up to half, almost half of global dementia is delayable and preventable with just 14 different things. 14 diagnoses, 14 conditions, which you can see which one you're at risk for and keep under control. All right, is everyone ready? Type in yes if you're ready for these 14 things. Type in yes if you're ready to take some notes with that. All right. Make sure everyone's ready. 14 things that we can do to protect our brain. Okay? So these 14 activities are activities of the body. And as you are doing these body activities, you're protecting the hardware, you're protecting your brain cells, you're minimizing the risk of neural degeneration, brain cell death, and literally minimizing the risk of 50% risk of dementia in general. Okay, all right, number one, education. Those who have a higher level of education have a lower risk of Alzheimer's or dementia in general compared to those with a lower level of education. Why is that? Does anyone know why that is? Those with a higher level of education have a lower risk of losing brain cells, right, compared to somebody who has a lower level of education. So if you think of the brain as a muscle, right? If you think of the brain as a muscle, as any muscle, you have to use it or lose it, right? Use it or lose it. So those with a higher level education protect their brain more, not because they're smarter, not because they have a higher IQ. It's because they spent more years in school exercising that brain. And when they exercise their brain, they build what I call cognitive reserves. Cognitive reserves. You're building reserves for your brain with that extra cushion of brain power. Does that make sense for you guys so far? Type in yes if that makes sense. Those with a higher level of education have better cognitive reserve, building that cushion of brain cell activity with that. So yeah, so new neural pathways, yes. Create new pathways, yes, yes, yes. Very good, absolutely. So that's number one, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you have to go back to school. It doesn't mean you have to go back and take classes. Look for things to do to keep that brain active. It could be Sudoku. For some people, it's crossword puzzles. For others, it's chess, checkers, things of that sort. Always keep learning. The key is always keep learning. It doesn't have to be in some formal classroom, but you got to keep that brain learning to keep that, to stave off Alzheimer's. Absolutely, 100%. To stave off Alzheimer's, to stave off dementia, keep learning. Okay, that's number one. Number two and so on is going to be a list of conditions that affects circulation. Anything that helps with circulation, helps with the brain. Any condition that worsens circulation increases the risk of neurodegeneration, increases the risk of the death of brain cells, increases the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. Okay, circulation is everything. So next on the list is high blood pressure. Those who have uncontrolled high blood pressure have a higher risk of Alzheimer's than those who have controlled blood pressure. Because what does high blood pressure do to your circulation? It messes it up. Okay? Does anyone know what a normal blood pressure should look like? Anyone know what the numbers are for a normal blood pressure? Any thoughts on that? What should it be overall? Most of you guys are probably young. You're not even thinking about blood pressure and things of that sort. So a good normal blood pressure is around 120/80. Yes, absolutely. That's kind of the goal that we want blood pressure to be. The closer to you get to 120/80, that's the range you want to be. Okay. If you can get a little bit lower, fine. If it's a little bit higher, not a big deal. But the closer you get to 120/80, the better it is. The higher the blood pressure, the more damage it does to circulation and the more damage it does for brain health. Next on the list, this is, I guess, number 3. Okay. Next on the list is high LDL cholesterol. An elevated LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, clogs up the circulation, messes up the circulation. It causes poor circulation up here and leads to brain cell death. Okay, you lose brain cells when you have high cholesterol, specifically the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol. Does that make sense to you guys so far? Because what does cholesterol do to our body? What does bad cholesterol do to our circulation? It clogs it up. And when it clogs it up, poor circulation with that. Okay. How many of you guys actually know your cholesterol numbers? How many of you guys actually know your cholesterol numbers? Type in yes if you know your cholesterol numbers. Type in no if you don't. Okay. All right. A few of you guys do. Yeah. And I'll give you an example here. I'll give you an example. If you have an LDL cholesterol of 130, okay, if you have an LDL cholesterol of 130, compared to a person with an LDL cholesterol of, let's say, 70, okay, 130 versus 70. The person with an LDL of 130 has around a 30% higher risk of dementia than a person with an LDL of 70. That's how significant it is, guys. That person with an LDL of 130 has about a 30% higher risk of specifically Alzheimer's dementia compared to a person with an LDL of 70. This is why it's important to know your numbers, okay? Because bad cholesterol clogs the circulation. Okay, next on the list, blood sugar, diabetes. How many of you guys have checked if you are pre-diabetic, not diabetic, or diabetic? There is a blood test that looks for that, right? There's a blood test that looks for that. Does anyone know the name of the blood test that looks to see if you're at risk for diabetes or not? Anyone know the name of that blood test? And the reason that diabetes is a risk factor, it is because high blood sugar, uncontrolled, promotes inflammation. And anytime inflammation is promoted, anytime you have chronic long-term inflammation, not good for the brain. And the blood test is called the A1C. That's correct, hemoglobin A1C. A normal hemoglobin A1C is under 5.7. Diabetes is when a hemoglobin A1C is above 6.5. Okay, and between 5.7 to 6.5, we call that pre-diabetes. How significant is this to protect your brain? We know that a diabetic has twice the risk of Alzheimer's compared to a non-diabetic. That's how significant it is. Okay, that's how significant it is. Diabetes, blood sugar. The end result of high blood sugar is inflammation, and inflammation messes up your circulation. So diabetics usually pass away or die from heart attacks and strokes. Okay, the end result is poor circulation in diabetes. So diabetes is a risk factor for the hardware, right? For the brain. And everything I mentioned so far, guys, is lifestyle, isn't it? Cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar. It's really what we eat, what we drink, how much exercise we do. Everything so far is lifestyle connected. And it's stuff that we do with our body that affects our brain so far. Okay, next on the list. Next on the list is our weight. Those who are overweight have a higher risk of having a hardware problem and losing brain cells than those who are not overweight. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because in the United States, probably 2 out of 3 of us are over the recommended body mass index, right? The BMI that looks at weight. Probably 2 out of 3 of us are overweight here in the US. Same thing with diabetes, right? At least half of us are either diabetic or pre-diabetic in the United States. And a lot of it has to do with what we eat and our nutrition and things of that sort with that. So being overweight is a risk factor for poor brain health. Again, that comes back to a lot of it is lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, and things of that sort. Okay, these things all affect circulation so far. Are you guys caught up with me so far? Everyone on the same page so far? We're good? Type in yes, we're on the same page. I want to make sure I haven't lost anyone in this talk with that. Okay, very cool. Okay, awesome. Awesome. Next on the list is physical activity. Physical activity. Those who exercise on a regular basis, have a lower risk of dementia than those who do not exercise. Okay, how much exercise should we do? Half an hour a day is my typical suggestion to folks. Do something for 30 minutes a day. You don't have to run or jog or do anything aggressive, right? A brisk walk is good. A stationary bike is good. Do something for half an hour a day, because when you're exercising and your blood and your heart rate's going higher, right, with the exercise, what are you improving to your brain? Right? We're improving blood flow. We are improving circulation with that. And so exercise, super important in many clinical trials, many published studies. Exercise is the main thing, one of the main things among several to minimize the risk for dementia, minimize the risk for Alzheimer's, and really to protect the brain cells with that by improving blood flow and circulation. Okay. Now, next on the list are different things than just circulation. There are 2 that are interesting. The first one is hearing loss, and the second one is vision loss. Having hearing loss or poor hearing increases the risk for dementia, increases the risk for Alzheimer's. Having poor vision, same thing, increases the risk for dementia, increases the risk for Alzheimer's. And the question is, why is that? Why is hearing loss or vision loss a risk factor for Alzheimer's? Any thoughts on that, guys? Any thoughts on that? Why is that? Hearing loss and vision loss, why is that on the list for poor brain health? Why is it on the list to lose brain cells and neurons? Okay, so we go back to the thought and the belief that the brain is like a muscle, right? Absolutely, lack of inputs. Okay, the brain is like a muscle. You have to use it or lose it. And the way we stimulate the brain, the way we use this muscle and stimulate the brain is through our five senses. What we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell, right? And so these five senses are needed for brain stimulation. So if you cannot hear, you're losing an entire portal of brain stimulation. If you can't see well, you're losing an entire portal of brain stimulation. So that brain becomes inactive or less active. And a less active brain increases the risk for dementia. This, though, is easily fixed. When we get older and our hearing starts to go away, a hearing aid, right, will reverse that issue. When we get older and we start having cataracts and glaucoma, there's cataract surgeries, there's eye drops for glaucoma and things of that sort. So all these things that I'm talking about is related to things that we can do with our lifestyle to protect your brain. Okay? So those are the next two, hearing loss, vision loss. Now, the next three is interesting. It has to do with toxicity, toxins. Okay, and you're wondering, like, what toxins, Dr. Trin? So our brain can collect toxins as we expose our body to toxins. So the obvious one, smoking toxins, right, increases not just emphysema and lung cancer and things of that sort, but smoking is a risk factor for Alzheimer's and dementia as well. Okay, lifestyle related. Next on the list, alcohol. I'm talking about too much alcohol with that. So, because I know some of you guys are like, Dr. Trin, what about my one glass of wine at night, right? I'm talking about too much alcohol. Unless your glass of wine is like this, that's different, right? That's probably too much with that. But if your glass of wine is maybe this much, not a concern. So smoking is a toxin. Alcohol is a toxin, risk factor for losing brain cells. The third toxin on the list is air pollution. Air pollution is a toxin as well. You guys know that air pollution is an actual toxin. And so those who live in cities with high air pollution have a higher risk of Alzheimer's than those who live in cities of low air pollution. Pretty crazy, isn't it? That's been published in research as well. Okay, so those threes relate to toxins. Next on the list is social isolation. Social isolation. Those who socialize on a regular basis have a lower risk of Alzheimer's and dementia than those who do not socialize. And socializing means you're in front of a human interacting with them, right? Socializing doesn't mean you're talking to ChatGPT or things of that sort, right? You're in front of a human interacting with them with that, because when you're socializing, you're using your brain cells in many ways. So the data is strong with that. Socialization, very important to improve and protect your brain. Okay. Next on the list is traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury. Those who get their heads banged, mainly through sports, are at higher risk for dementia later on, including Parkinson's dementia and Alzheimer's and things of that sort. So traumatic brain injury is a big risk factor. Okay. This lecture's getting depressing, isn't it? We'll have some good news. Now, next on the list is, I think this is my 14th? Okay, number one, number one's education. Number two was high blood pressure. Number three was diabetes. Number four was cholesterol. Number five was, I think, obesity. Number 6, see, my memory's not that great, guys. Number 6, I think, was was it the toxins, alcohol?
I
Oh,
got you back here, Dr. Tran. I've got you. Number 6 is physical activity.
there you go. Perfect.
Number 7 is hearing loss.
Uh-huh.
8 is smoking.
Vision loss is 8.
Vision loss. Okay.
Cool.
Alcohol, air pollution, social
Yeah,
isolation. Yeah,
perfect.
you've got
So
it great.
we're on number 14, the last one. Number 14 is depression. Number 14 is really moves into mental health. And the question is, why is depression a risk factor for losing brain cells with that? And there are several reasons that depression is a risk factor for that. We know that if you're depressed, you don't want to go out and socialize. We know that if you're depressed, you want to stay home and you don't want to interact with your brain. We know that if you're depressed, you're also anxious, you're also stressed. And so you make stress hormones. Does anyone know the name of the stress hormones that the body makes when you're stressed? Anyone know the name of the stress hormones that the body makes when you are stressed out? Yes, cortisol, absolutely. Yeah, cortisol is a stress hormone. And cortisol, when it is made due to stress, it goes downstream and it causes all kinds of health outcomes that are negative with that. As a matter of fact, depression, which is a mental health problem, depression, which is a software problem, not a hardware problem, is associated with all kinds of disease states. If you're depressed, your risk for high blood pressure increases. If you're depressed, your risk for diabetes increases. If you're depressed, your risk for obesity increases. If you're depressed, your risk for cancer increases, and your risk for Alzheimer's increases. And the question is, why is a mental health problem connected to all these physical conditions, right? Like, why is a mental health problem connected to all these physical conditions? Because we see the connection all the time in research when you have something that's emotionally related, right? Why should your emotions connect to your physical? And the answer is really interesting. It comes out of research and what I've learned from doing many clinical trials over the last, many years. And in a clinical trial, which is the field that I work in, I'm a medical researcher. When we study something, when we study a medication, there's always a treatment group that's taking the real thing. And then there's always a group that's not taking the real thing. What do we call that group? Does anyone know? The group that's not taking the real thing. What do we call that group? Does anyone know what we call that? Any thoughts on that? Yes, it is called the placebo group. Absolutely, the placebo group. But here's the thing. Here's something very interesting. Why do we need a placebo group, guys? Why don't we just test the medication and ignore and not have a placebo group? Just test it to see if it works. Why is a placebo group needed? Any thoughts on that? Do you know why a placebo group is needed at all? I mean, we can just test the medication, right? What are your thoughts on that? And in the world of clinical trials, when we're testing the medication versus a placebo group, there's always a percentage of patients in the placebo group that always gets better, even when they're not taking the real medication. Isn't that interesting? There's always a percentage of patients in the placebo group that still improve, even though they're not taking the real thing. Why is that? Why is it that you're not taking the real thing, you're not taking the real medicine, and yet you still get better? What are your thoughts? I mean, is it magic? Like, and we call that the placebo effect, right? The placebo effect is when placebo works, just like medicine. With that, yeah. And so what I've learned is this. What I've learned is this from doing years of clinical research. Our mind is powerful. Our thoughts are powerful. Our emotions are powerful. And our mind influences our body. Okay. And yeah, you expect to get better. There's an emotion that is associated with that expectation of getting better. There's feelings of hope, feeling of, I'm going to get better, right? There's maybe less depression thinking that you're taking the real thing for whatever condition, right? That you're taking, that you're being treated for in the clinical trial. So our thoughts, the thoughts that we have, creates brain cells that connect, brain cells that talk, brain cells that communicate. And when brain cells connect and communicate, it is associated with an emotion and a feeling that is connected to that thought. Every thought that you have is associated with an emotion. Did you realize that? Because you can have happy thoughts, you can have sad thoughts, you can have thoughts that makes you anxious, you can have thoughts that make you feel peaceful. Does that make sense to you guys? Type in yes if that makes sense, that every thought that you have is connected with an emotion and a feeling with that. Okay, type in yes if that makes sense. So the emotions and the feelings that we have, the emotions and feelings that we have, they're not like pie in the sky emotions. They're actually a chemical that is associated with every emotion. Every emotion is simply a chemical that is produced from the thought. Okay, the feeling that you have is a chemical that is produced from the thought. And that chemical is not inert. It doesn't sit there and do nothing. That chemical goes downstream to connect and create chemical reactions. And chemical reactions that go downstream from the initial emotion, the chemical that goes downstream that connects and create chemical reactions, these chemical reactions will either lead to health or to disease. Does that make sense to you guys? Thought create emotions. Emotions are chemicals. Chemicals go downstream. They create chemical reactions. And those chemical reactions will either lead to health or to disease. Does that make sense? Type in yes if that makes sense to you guys. This is why mental health is just as important as physical health. This is why the mind is connected to the body, because the mind, your thoughts, your beliefs, isn't just something high in the sky. Your thoughts and beliefs are reactions and connections of brain cells that you have. And these brain cell connections, based on your thoughts and beliefs, create emotions that come from these thoughts and beliefs. And the emotions are simply chemicals, right? And these emotional chemicals go downstream, they connect, they create chemical reactions that will lead to either health or to disease. So if you're in the placebo group, you don't know that you're in the placebo group. You think you're getting the real thing. When you think you're getting the real thing, you feel hopeful. Maybe you feel a little bit more happy. Maybe you feel like you're going to get better. These are emotions, guys. These are emotions. And these emotions consistently in every placebo group, there's always a percentage of patients that get better without taking the real medicine. Do you see the connection here of how powerful our mind is? Do you see the connection here between this is why we have a placebo group in every clinical trial, because simply believing, simply the thought of hope brings healing to many conditions that we treat without taking a pill. It's so crazy when you think about it. This is why we have a placebo group, because we want to separate out that belief part that makes somebody better versus the medication, right? If the medication helped you this much and your belief helped you this much, right? We want to separate out this much to see if the medicine really works. But like, why did the belief help you that much without taking a pill? And it all connects back to your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions that are tied to that. And this is the importance of mental health, because mental health isn't and should never be in the back burner behind physical health. Mental health is physical health, because mental health leads to emotions that produces real chemistry. Okay, that's what I want to connect for you guys. So we know that the body influences the brain, right? Those 14 things is body, physical activity, what we eat, how we live, whether you smoke or not. These are about body stuff that affects our brain. But at the same time, your brain affects your body simply by your thoughts, your beliefs, and the emotions that you have, right? Because these emotions are not inert. They are actually chemicals that go downstream with that. So I want you to think of this. What are you doing on a daily basis that creates the emotions you have today? Right? What are you doing on a daily basis that creates the emotions you have today? Because the emotions that you have are chemicals that will go downstream, that will either promote health or promote sickness. Right? What are you doing to protect your mental health? Have you ever heard of the sympathetic system versus the parasympathetic system? Have you guys ever heard that before? This autonomic nervous system, sympathetic versus parasympathetic. It is a system in your brain run autonomically on its own. And, and the sympathetic system is a system that is designed to help you survive. It's called fight or flight. Have you heard of fight or flight? A mental state where, oh no, there's something dangerous coming, fight or flight, right? I'm going to fight or I'm going to run, right? That's the sympathetic nervous system. And that sympathetic nervous system is associated with emotions, right? What is the emotions of fear, fighting, running from trouble, things of that sort, right? There's emotions of stress, anxiety, anger. That's all fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system, designed to protect the body from danger. And then on the other side, the parasympathetic system is another system that is designed where you're resting, you're relaxing, you're at peace, and there's no threat around you. Our body's always in one of two states, fight or flight, or rest and relax, right? Recovery. And it's designed to be in one or two states. When there's danger, you're in fight or flight. When there's a lack of danger, you're resting, you're recovering, you're rebuilding. Parasympathetic has emotions attached to it. It's the emotion of calm, peace, relaxation, lack of fear, joy, love, right? Parasympathetic. Our body's in one of two states. It can't be in both states at once. How we live today determines where you're at most of the time. Fight or flight was never designed to be chronic, but most of us today live in an environment where we're always stressed, where we're always anxious. There's always deadlines. There's always things that create fear, anxiety. Just turn on the news, right? Just turn on the news and you see just a headline of bad news. We live in America, most of us live in a state of the sympathetic system, fight or flight. And when you're in that system, you're creating emotions that does not lead to health. Makes sense? When you live in the sympathetic fight or flight system, you're creating emotions that do not lead to health, right? You're creating chronic stress, chronic cortisol release, which goes downstream, creates obesity, diabetes, hypertension, things of that sort. When you're in the parasympathetic system is when your body's healing. And the parasympathetic system has a set of emotions, right? Cortisol is not in parasympathetic, it lives in fight or flight. But if you go and you hug your loved ones, you actually have an emotion that's attached to that, and you have a chemical that's produced is called oxytocin. Oxytocin lives in the parasympathetic system, and that leads to healing, that leads to lowering blood pressure, that leads to lowering inflammation. So my question to you is, are you living most days in one state or the other? And how do you get from that fight or flight state, that state of anxiety, stress, running around, to over here? And a lot of it depends on our thoughts and our beliefs, right? Because activities and events that occur in life, they are neutral. They are neutral. Activities and events and experiences that occur in life, they are neutral. They are neither sympathetic or parasympathetic. What puts you in one angle versus the other is the meaning that you give to that activity, the meaning that you give to that experience. Okay, I'll give you an example. Oh no, I lost my job today. I got fired because I gave a bad lecture, right? So one meaning I can give to that experience, which is losing my job, that's just an experience. One meaning I can give to that experience is simply, oh no, it's the end. Life is going downhill. I can't pay my bills. I'm losing the house, right? I'm going bankrupt because I've lost my job. That leads to emotional states associated with stress, anger, fear, sympathetic, fight or flight, right? Not good outcome for the health, because every emotion is a chemical that goes downstream that leads to either health or lack of health. So I can either interpret me losing my job as something negative like that, the meaning that I gave that, or I can give me losing my job a different meaning. Maybe that second meaning is, thank God I hated that job, right? I didn't like my boss. Thank goodness I got fired. I now have an opportunity to go find something different, something better. I have an opportunity now to take a little vacation, or I can get unemployment, or I can go back to school. Thank God I lost that job. The experience is neutral. Losing your job is an experience. What makes life bad or good is the meaning that we give to that experience. Does that make sense to you guys so far? Type in yes if that makes sense to you guys, right? The experience you occur every day at work, with life, with relatives, with friends, with relationships, they are neutral experiences. It is the meaning that we give to these experiences that decide what part of mental health we live in. And meaning and purpose is what anchors the framework that we have to interpret our experiences, right? Having meaning and purpose is what anchors the framework that we have to frame all of our experiences. And so my question to you is, if you have an experience that looks bad, right? It looks bad because we gave it a meaning that made it bad. Makes sense? If you have an experience that looks bad, the experience is neutral. It is because we gave it a meaning that made it bad. But who decides on the meaning, guys? Who gets to decide the meaning of your experiences? We do. Always reevaluate the beliefs that you have that may lead things downstream to an emotion, right? And that emotion is either going to lead you down to a path of health or to a path of disease, because every emotion is a chemical that starts up here with a belief and a thought. So really, I want to connect with you guys that yes, the body influences the mind and the brain, but the mind strongly influences the body. And the way that we control our mind is determining your purpose, your passion, your reason for living. And that frames every experience for you of how to interpret each experience. and you want to interpret the experiences in a way, you want to give the meaning to experiences in every experience in a way that leads to health. And so I don't know if I got it all in 50 minutes with that, but I want to get that across to you from a scientific perspective, from a perspective of a researcher with that. So there you go.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Trin. I know for me, that really resonated that we obviously have the power to change our thoughts, and that thoughts really carry a lot of power and influence both our mindset as well as our long-term health. So I know for me, this has been a really great session, and I really appreciate you once again volunteering to participate in some of the ELFA Women's Subcommittee initiatives. And with that, I wanted to extend a couple of quick thank yous to others that made this particular event possible. So Maggie Hawley for the connection to Dr. Trin. Thank you so much for all the work that you and the other members of the Mental Health Initiative are doing to provide programming such as this to the equipment finance community. And as always, thank you to the ELFA, especially Heather, who has been serving as a co-moderator and support function for today's webinar. And we appreciate everything that the ELFA does to support our mental health initiative team, as well as any of the other programming that is coming through the ELFA Women's group. One thing to just mention is if you enjoyed this presentation and you want to stay connected on all the things that our subcommittee is doing, we do have a LinkedIn group that we would invite you to follow. It's Women for Inclusion, for being the number, not the word. So please follow along there for any upcoming webinars and other fun events that we're planning this year. And with that, I'll hand that back to Heather to wrap us up.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Dr. Tran. That was wonderful. I was trying to follow along with your top tips over here in the comments so everyone could take good notes. And I got one out of order, so I apologize for that. But thank you so much for everything that you presented to us today. I want to remind all of our attendees that the webinar has been recorded and will be available on the ELFA website. So give us a couple days to make sure that that gets up and processed correctly, and then you'll be able to have access to that. Also, immediately following the webinar, you'll get a short survey. Please go ahead and answer those survey questions for us. It helps us improve future webinars and functionality and all of that good stuff. So we definitely want your opinion. And other than that, have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful afternoon, and a celebratory Juneteenth.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.